What if your president stood up and said, from this moment on, no foreigner will ever own a single piece of land in our country again? What if he took land once sold to billion-dollar corporations and handed it free of charge to the poorest farmers in the nation? In early 2025, something extraordinary happened, not in Washington, not in Paris, but in the heart of West Africa. In a single stroke of the pen, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso, signed a decree that forever altered the meaning of land. No longer would land be a commodity bought and sold. No longer would ancestral soil be taken for golf resorts, oil pipelines, or monoculture plantations that left African families hungry. From now on, land is not for sale. Not to French companies, not to multinational investors, not even to the richest man on earth. This is not just policy, it is revolution. It is a return of what was stolen, a rebuke to centuries of colonial logic, and a powerful signal that Africa's destiny will no longer be dictated from abroad. The world has called it dangerous. Investors have called it reckless. But the people, they call it deliverance. And now the question is not whether this will change Burkina Faso. The question is whether this will change all of Africa. Stay with us, because what you are about to hear might be the most radical story the continent has ever told. A story about soil sovereignty and the man who dared to return both to his people. Let the courage of our people be seen by the eyes of God. Let the world stop looking down on Africa. Share this video for a continent that stands strong, proud, and self-reliant. Tell us where you are watching from so we know Africa is not forgotten. Like, comment, and subscribe to support the rise of a freer, stronger, and more prosperous Africa, an Africa that will no longer be silenced. It began not with a parade, not with a press conference, but with a quiet signature in a government office in Ouagadougou. With a single stroke, Captain Ibrahim Traoré rewrote the foundation of property in Burkina Faso. He signed a law that made it illegal for anyone foreign or domestic to ever own land again. From that moment forward, every square meter of land in the country, urban or rural farmland or forest, was nationalized. Ownership was abolished. The era of private land titles was over. In its place, a new model emerged: leaseholds only. Citizens could access land, use land, even build on it, but they could never buy or sell it. And foreigners excluded completely. There are only two types of leases now. One short-term up to 18 years meant for temporary agricultural use, and one long-term up to 99 years reserved for strategic development that aligns with national goals. But ownership never again, not by international investors, not by political elites, not by anyone. The question then became, who has access to land under this new model? The answer was both radical and simple: citizens. Not because they have money, not because they have power, but because they belong. This law dismantled the logic that governed African soil for generations. Under colonialism and its aftershocks, land was treated as a market, something to be bought, flipped, speculated on. Traoré's reform flipped that logic. Land is no longer a commodity, it is a birthright. And in doing so, the government removed the profit motive from land itself. What once enriched corporations will now empower communities. What once was fenced off will now be cultivated. International observers called it reckless. Market analysts predicted economic collapse. But on the streets of Burkina Faso, in the villages and fields, people began to whisper a different word: freedom. To understand the power of Traoré's reform, we must first understand what came before it. For more than a century, African land was not governed by the will of its people, but by the hands of empires. Colonizers did not ask permission. They drew lines across landscapes, seized ancestral lands, and declared them the property of the crown. After independence, the chains of colonialism were repainted, not broken. The laws remained. In Burkina Faso, it was the Expropriation Act of 1975, a relic of post-colonial policy that allowed the government to seize land in the name of public interest, only to hand it over to foreign developers. This act, used for decades to build resorts, mines, and plantations, had one core assumption: that land belonged to the powerful, not the people. That law is now gone. In its place stands a declaration of ancestral return. For the first time, the land is being reconnected to the people who walk it, plant it, and bleed for it. This is not just legal reform, it is spiritual restitution. It is the return of what was stolen, not only physically but culturally. Traoré did not frame the reform as economic policy. He called it healing, a healing of wounds left by colonial theft, a healing of the silence that followed, a healing of the injustice that allowed generations of farmers to till soil they could never call their own. And this healing matters deeply, because for decades, African land was treated as global real estate. Resorts were built where elders once prayed. Crops were grown for European markets while local families went hungry. Oil pipelines carved through villages, the soil became a commodity. Now the soil is sacred again. By abolishing ownership and asserting national control, Traoré reversed the flow of history. He didn't just rewrite a law, he reclaimed a lineage. This isn't about compensation, it's about correction. A line has been drawn in the soil, and for the first time in a long time, that soil belongs to the children of Africa. Signing the law was only the first chapter. The real story began when boots hit the ground. In villages across Burkina Faso, government teams arrived not with speeches or slogans, but with maps, surveys, and mission. Their task was clear: identify land needs, verify community claims, and begin the most ambitious land redistribution the country had ever seen. No longer would land be accessed through political connections or silent auctions. There would be no middlemen, no shady brokers. Land would be granted directly through the state, and it would go not to those with the deepest pockets, but to those with the most urgent needs. Thousands of smallholder farmers, once tenants on their own ancestral lands, are now being given legal protected access. For the first time in living memory, they hold documents that defend, not deny, their right to farm. They do not rent dirt. They possess dignity. These allocations are not handouts. They are restorations, and they come with more than paper. They come with infrastructure. Irrigation systems are being built in parched regions once forgotten by development plans. Water is flowing not from corporate pipes, but from collective channels designed for public use. Agricultural training centers have opened not in capital cities, but in the very villages that suffered under food insecurity. Farmers are learning new methods: crop rotation, organic fertilization, and climate-smart techniques that make resilience possible in a changing climate. For decades, Burkina Faso mined gold 10 tons per day, yet only 1 ton officially reported. The rest vanished into foreign accounts and elite corruption. Now that same state is giving back something more precious than gold: land. Because land is not just soil, it is security, it is identity. And in a nation where families once begged for a patch the size of a blanket, the redistribution of hectares is a revolution more profound than any slogan. This is not policy, it is power returned. And in the eyes of farmers who now sow seeds with a future they can touch, it is justice long delayed, finally delivered. For decades, the women of Burkina Faso carried the weight of agriculture on their backs. They tilled the soil, fetched the water, harvested the crops, and sold the produce in dusty markets. Yet they owned nothing, not 1 acre, not 1 title. They fed families but remained invisible in the legal system. Captain Ibrahim Traoré saw this not just as injustice but as inefficiency. How can a nation thrive when half its labor force is denied the tools to succeed? Under the new land reform, this imbalance is no longer tolerated. For the first time in the country's history, land is being allocated directly to women's cooperatives. Not as a symbolic gesture, but as a strategic move. These groups now manage farmland, livestock zones, and processing centers for shea butter, grains, and dairy. This is not about charity. It is about unleashing potential. The results are already visible. In regions like Kédougou and Fodène Gourma, female-led cooperatives are transforming communities. Food security has increased, household incomes are rising, children are attending school more regularly, and decision-making power is shifting. These fields are not just greener, they are smarter. Women are using drip irrigation, compost farming, and local seed banks to increase yields and reduce dependency on foreign aid. They are no longer just workers. They are landowners, planners, and leaders. When women move from laborers to landholders, everything changes. Communities stabilize, markets grow, dignity returns. This reform is not just feminist, it is economic, and it is working. Burkina Faso is a young nation not just in spirit but in demographics. Over half of its population is under the age of 17. For years, this was framed as a burden. Politicians spoke of a crisis of unemployment. Economists warned of a ticking time bomb. But Captain Traoré saw something different. He saw possibility. Under the new land reform, young people are no longer seen as liabilities. They are seen as leaders. Land is now being granted to youth not for survival, but for sovereignty. This shift is not just symbolic, it is structural. Youth are being trained in vertical farming, seed genetics, and solar-powered irrigation. In rural regions, new agro-hubs double as startup incubators. These centers do not hand out aid, they build enterprise. Students who once fled villages for city jobs now return with laptops, drones, and export-ready crops. In the southern district of Gawa, One youth collective launched the country's first mobile seed bank. Designed, coded, and deployed by teenagers who had never seen a computer 3 years prior, it now serves hundreds of farmers across remote communities. This is not charity, this is ingenuity. From cassava flour processing to mushroom farming, young cooperatives are rewriting what it means to grow. They are building systems, not just harvesting crops. They are designing local economies rooted in autonomy. And the effects are rippling. Migration patterns are reversing. Where once youth fled rural life, they now find purpose in it. Abandoned villages are becoming innovation zones. Traditional farming is blending with modern enterprise. A generation raised in exclusion is now rewriting the rules of inclusion. What happens when youth stop begging for opportunity and start building it? What changes when land is not inherited by birth but granted by potential? This is not a development program. This is a declaration. The future of Burkina Faso is not being imported. It is being grown by its own youth with their own hands on their own land. Land reform in Burkina Faso is not only changing who farms, it is transforming the entire economic blueprint of the nation. The days of selling raw land to foreign companies for luxury exports are over. The new rule is clear: investors are welcome, but only on Burkina Faso's terms. Under the reform, every foreign company must submit its project for approval. If it does not feed the country, employ locals, or build domestic industry, it gets rejected. A lease may be granted, but it comes with conditions. 70% of raw materials must be sourced locally. Compliance is not optional, it is constitutional. This shift has already begun to bear fruit. Take tomatoes. For decades, Burkina Faso imported 95% of its tomato paste from Italy. Now, a state-supported factory outside Bobo Dioulasso produces over 3,000 tons per month, employing 900 workers and purchasing from more than 4,000 smallholder farmers. National imports have been cut in half, or wheat. Until recently, over 80% of flour came from France and Algeria. Today, a regional initiative led by Waga Grain Works is grinding local wheat and aiming for full domestic coverage by 2027. Cotton once shipped raw to Europe is now processed at home. The Burkina Fiber Collective, a network of local textile cooperatives, handles over 100,000 tons annually, spinning, dyeing, and weaving for West African markets. And for local businesses, the path is now clear. Land titles used to be expensive, corrupt, and inaccessible. A single deed could cost the equivalent of 200,000 CFA francs in bribes. Now the cost is 20,000 flat rate, fully digital and traceable. Transparency has followed. Land disputes have dropped 43%. Corruption complaints have fallen by more than half. People now believe paperwork can protect them. This is not development through donation. This is economic circulation value produced and retained in local hands. From solar-powered cassava dryers to mobile apps linking farmers with bakers, a new economy is taking shape. Burkina Faso is no longer waiting for investment to trickle down. It is building value from the ground up. Burkina Faso is not just passing a law. It is drawing a line in the soil. The days of selling land to the highest bidder are over. The land now speaks a new language: sovereignty, not surrender. Dignity, not dependency. Identity, not exploitation. Across the continent, eyes are turning toward Ouagadougou. In Mali, agricultural cooperatives are asking for copies of the law. In Uganda, youth movements are mapping abandoned fields. In Ghana, lawmakers are studying the model. Something is shifting. The winds are changing. But with this change comes resistance. Western embassies whisper threats. Investment deals vanish overnight. Think tanks warn of disaster. And yet Captain Traoré does not flinch. He does not apologize, because he knows this is not just about Burkina Faso. This is about what Africa can become. This movement is not about exclusion. It is about inclusion. Investors are welcome, but only those who respect the soil and its people. Those who come to exploit will find the doors closed. Those who come to build will find partners ready. Now we must ask, what if this is only the beginning? What if the model spreads? What if every African country reclaimed its land, not for elites, not for exports, but for its own people? The answer does not lie in conferences or slogans. It lies in action, in policy, in courage. The kind of courage it takes to challenge centuries of injustice with one signature. So where do you stand? If you believe land is more than a market, type your truth. If you believe Africa deserves to grow its future, not borrow it, speak it aloud. If you believe this fire should spread, then do not just amplify. Do not just watch, witness. Do not just agree, act. This is not the end of the story. It is only the spark. Africa is not rising someday, it is rising now. Below are 2 letters sent from 2 friends in 2 different countries to the program. Please listen. Don't forget to register and speak up your dreams. My name is Amina Kuyate. I live in a small village outside Tamale in northern Ghana. I watched this story from my uncle's phone, and when it ended I had tears in my eyes, not just because of what Captain Traoré did, but because I saw in it the possibility of all of us standing tall again. For years we have lived with empty hands and full hearts. We have watched our land sold without our voices, our labor exported without our names, and our stories buried beneath someone else's wealth. But today something different is stirring. I feel it in my chest. I feel it in the earth. This is the heartbeat of a new Africa. When I saw that the land in Burkina Faso was no longer for sale, I thought of my grandfather. He farmed the same field for 50 years, yet died without a title. My mother walks 10 kilometers for water to nourish a soil we never truly owned. How many more of us must give everything for land that gives us nothing back? This video is not just information, it is a mirror. It reflects our pain, yes, but also our promise. If they can do it in Ouagadougou, we can do it in Tamale, in Nairobi, in Dakar. We can rise together. Africa Rising is not a slogan, it is a prayer. And I see that prayer being answered. Through courage, through policy, through unity. We must learn from each other, not wait for permission. The world may try to divide us, but now is the time to remember we are one soil, one people, one vision. I believe in a new Africa where our youth build, our women lead, and our land feeds us first. Let us not be afraid. Let us be loud, because Africa Rising is not coming. It is here. To every brother and sister from coast to desert, from mountain to shore, I say this. Do not forget who you are. Do not forget what we can be. Africa Reborn is not a dream, it is our duty. My name is Elijah Otieno, a teacher living in Kisumu, Kenya. Tonight as I sat under the broken light in my kitchen, I watched the story of Captain Ibrahim Traoré unfold on a small screen, and I could not move. My heart was heavy, my eyes full, because I saw more than a law, I saw a beginning. For too long we have lived under a silence so deep it buried our hopes. We have watched outsiders take from our soil while we begged for aid from the same hands that emptied our lands. I have seen students in my class come hungry because their families have no land to grow food. I have seen my neighbors lose their farms to investors who never learned their names. But now something is awakening. Burkina Faso is showing us what courage looks like. They are no longer waiting. And neither should we. This is not just their victory, it is our call. A call for unity, for justice, for dignity. A call for a new Africa. I dream of a continent where land is not for sale but for seed, where every child grows up believing in the richness beneath their feet, where our leaders rise not for applause but for accountability. And I believe that dream is possible, because I can see it, Africa Rising. Africa is not poor. Africa has been plundered. But now we rise not in anger but in wisdom. We rise by learning from one another. We rise by daring to be bold. And in every village where land returns to the people, in every field where a woman plants without fear, I see proof that Africa Rising is not a whisper, it is a roar. Let us not be divided by borders drawn by strangers. Let us be united by dreams shaped in our hearts. This is our moment, this is our turn, this is Africa Reborn. And I say with faith and fire, Africa Rising is no longer a promise, it is our path.